Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we are going to move on our reservation system, and we are going to start taking care of validations to make sure that no user can pick a date or a set of dates that are already reserved for another user. So this will be a really simple function, and this should be a really fast video. So yeah, let's get on with it. Before carrying on with the video, I just want to let you know that only 20% of you are subscribed to the channel, so if you are enjoying this series and want to see more of it, then please do leave a subscribe down below. It will help you to not miss a single video in the future. Okay, so I have my Docker running and I have a page of a post right in here. So our goal for today is to gray out the days that have already been reserved so that the user cannot pick those dates. We'll also copy that function over to the backend in order for the backend to also validate that information, because remember, it is always you can't just validate the data on the front end, or you shouldn't do that. You must also do that same validation in the backend in case something in the front end goes wrong. So that's exactly what we are going to do. Let me just go in here. Okay. And now, so we are going to start off in the front end. We are going to, first of all, try to disable the days that have already been reserved and go from there. So the first thing that we are going to do is to, in the component did mount, when you get the data post, the post data, better yet, we are going to loop through all of the reservations and try to gray out the days that have already been reserved by disabling them within the React calendar. So the first thing that we can do is to first of all come in here and do a simple loop to loop through all of the days that have already been reserved. And we can do that by saying let I equal to 0 and I smaller than results dot data dot reservations dot length, and this is an I++. This will loop through all of the reservations, or better yet, it will loop through an integer, and we can then access the array. Let me just open up Insomnia to show you something. So we'll get the reservations, it will contain just the reservations of a specific ID, of a specific post ID, and we'll loop through an array that looks something like this. So if you come in here and get the API post list, we have the reservations, and this will be populated just like we did in a previous lesson. If you haven't checked it out, check it. It is an incredibly important video. Okay, so we'll get an array that looks something like this. This is a lot of information, but we can extract a lot of important things from it. So we have the date start and the date end for each and every single reservation. This is the data that we'll use in order to find out which days to disable. So the first thing that we have to do is to get the date start, which will be equal to new date results dot data dot reservations I, because this is an array, remember, and date start. We have to do a new date because otherwise this will be just a string which we can't use as a timestamp. So we'll do the same thing for the date ends. Let me just close that. Okay, date ends and date ends in here. Okay, so now we'll simply go back one day for the date start and the date ends, because that's what's required as per the dates. And for some reason this works like this. I'm not really sure why, but I'm going to explain it better when we get to demonstrating the actual project. But for now, let's just go back one day, and we do that by saying get date -1, and do the same thing for the date ends again, and then we can move on. Okay, so now we have to loop through all of the days between date start and date end and add them into an array list which will contain the disabled days, obviously, just like we did when we tried this feature out in a previous lesson. We had the disabled days, so this is the thing that we'll actually update. First things first, we have to add a disabled days array in here. So we'll initialize that as empty. And then we'll loop through all of the days. So in here, we won't use a for loop. We'll use a while loop, as it is much better for the case at hand. So while loop smaller than date ends, so this loop starts at date start, and it will only end once we get to the date end, and we'll keep updating it throughout each iteration. Then we simply do disable days dot push loop. Okay, so this push will add the current day that we are looping through to the disable days array, and then we can simply say let new date equals to loop.setDate loop.getDate plus 1. This will move the loop date. I can call it this loop date. I believe it looks a bit better and easier to understand. Loop date. Okay. So this will make sure that this new date will contain the loop date plus 1 day. This will obviously move the while forward. Otherwise, we would be in an infinite loop. So now we can simply say loop equals to new date, new date. Okay, so that's it. Then in the end, we can simply console log the disabled days, just so that we know which days are disabled. And then the loop, we update the state of this component so that it takes in the new disabled days. So first of all, and we have the info data in here, so I'm going to actually use it. And the disabled days will be out of the for loop. So in here, just grab the disabled days, comma, disabled days. And because the names match with the state, we don't need to do 2 points disabled days again. And that's it. So now the data should disable out the days that have already been reserved. So we are going to test it out right now. Just give me a second to get everything ready.
2 hours later.
Okay, so now it is working, but I made one small assumption that wasn't correct earlier. In the reservations, I thought we were already populating, as I said before. Populating means just exchanging the IDs of that are in the reservation list of the post by the post object itself. So I'm going to quickly go over what we've done here. I'm going to remove this so that I can show you what was before. This was all of the code that I was writing. So we have the find by ID, then console log, and then the resolve results. This will give us, let me just come in here, this will give us a post object like this. So it has the ID of the reservations. But one cool thing that you can do with Mongoose, MongoDB itself, is using a function called populate, which is exactly like I have here, and I incentive you to copy it. So this basically does, it will find the ID, the post by ID, this is just the same, but then we have this little tag here called populate. This will again exchange the ID by the object itself. Then we do exec, and we pass along the function which will, if it gives out an error, it will return a reject with that error. Otherwise, it will just resolve the post. This will again give us everything that we need, and as you can see, it is already working. So if I come in here into reservation, into post better yet, and clear that, I'm going to console log the result.data so that you can see exactly what this endpoint will get. So reloading that, we can see that we get a description, image URL, all the things that we were used to. But then in the reservations, instead of adding just the ID, we have the data of that reservations ID. So this is a really cool thing about Mongo, and this is a really useful thing that you should remember to use. And then, as you can see, we have these days disabled. So let's try to pick another date. For example, the 9th of June to 16th of June. Reserve. Everything went correctly, okay. And the 9th of June isn't well placed, but the 16th of June is. So let's try to fix that. So in the date start, I believe it is because of, yeah, this doesn't have to be -1 day. Yeah, that's correct. Or better yet, it has to be -2 days. Okay, that makes it correct. Now we can actually move on. And remember, because we aren't dealing with days itself, we are dealing with nights, so it gets a bit awkward. But yeah, that will fix it. So now we can be able to move on and to actually validate the data. So this part is completely done. We are free to move to other parts of the code. So now, in order to make a validation in the front end, just make sure that no user picks a date in between two things, like we can do here. We are picking a date, making a reservation when there's a reservation in between. So in order to fix this, we'll go on the onChange, and we'll actually grab this for loop. So this will come in useful now. Just copy it here, and we'll change it in order to make the validation for us. So this loop will be the same, the date start will be the same. In here it will be -1, I believe. Then we'll just check if the date 0 in the position 0, because remember, this gives out an array with two dates, the beginning date and the ending date. And we'll just check if the beginning date beginning and the end date doesn't have any reservations in between. And this is really simple. We just need an if condition, which will say if date 0 smaller than date start. So we'll have to do this for every single reservation, but yeah, it will work. And date 1, which is the ending date of the choice that the user has made, is bigger than date end, then we'll return false. This will remove the dates that the user has picked, making it an invalid choice. Then at the end, we'll simply set this date of the set the state of the date to the current one that the user has just chosen. So let's try. Oops, there's an error. Yeah, because this is this state dot info dot reservations. So let me just quickly change that. And before that, we can say this dot set state date equals to null, just to clear everything up. And now coming back in here, we'll try to pick the date that has reservations in between them, and as you can see, it is automatically removed. But if we try to choose a date that doesn't have a reservation in between them, then it is completely fine and the user is able to do that. Okay, so that's basically it for the front end. Now we don't need to do anything else. It is making the validations for us. However, in the backend, we should also do this validation, like I've said in the beginning of the lesson. And the validation will be exactly the same as the front end, but we'll be able to, I'll create a function called validate, which will then, we'll be able to add more validation and more restrictions if you feel the need for it. For now, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to actually straight up copy this for loop because it will be the one that we used. And then coming into the reservation function folder file, we will create a validate function, which will contain the ID, the date starts, and the date ends. Then we'll just create the arrow function for the promise, as we always do. And we have the resolve and the reject, and then again an arrow function. Okay, don't forget the comma at the end. Let's make it a tiny bit bigger and you can collapse that. Okay, so now I'll just straight up drop the for loop in here, but we'll do something before that because we must get the post by ID before we get any of the information needed. So in order to do this, I'm going to call up on the postfunc file, and I don't believe it is. Oh, it is. No, it isn't. Okay, so we must add the postfunc in the imports, require post, and I believe that's what it is called. It isn't posts. Yep. Then coming back down, I simply say dot get by ID, and we say then results and arrow function at the end of it, and we'll move the for loop inside it. Okay, so that's it. Let's add the catch just for good measure, and we'll reject if any error occurs. So new error. Okay, so these will validate it, but obviously there are some differences from the front end. The beginning of it, which is instead of this .state.info, it is results.reservations, and the same thing in here. Okay, so now we won't need to transform this into a date because obviously in the front end, in the back end, it automatically gives us the date as it should be. So we can just grab this, place it here, date starts, and then for the date end, copy it here and remove this piece of code, which won't be necessary. However, for the date starts that comes from the create function, we will have to create a new date because it is a string. So that's the way we have to do things. So date starts, and then simply date ends, and then in here. Okay, so now obviously we won't have a set state. We'll simply reject the reservation anytime this happens. So we'll say new error, and then for the message it can be already reserved, whatever, something like that. Now coming in here, we already have the rejects. So the only thing that we must do is call the validate function anytime this create function is called. So we can simply come in here and say module.exports.validate. We'll have to pass along the ID, the date starts and the date ends, and we'll say then, and we won't add any parameters there. Open up the brackets, move this part of the function that we previously had inside of it, and then simply add the catch in order to find out if the validate function fails, then reject the function. And that's basically it. We just have to add the resolve at the end, and at the end is after the for loop. So if the for loop goes fine and this reject isn't called, then at the end we have to call resolve in order for the then function to be called. Okay, so let's clear this up a tiny bit, and that's it. Now, in order to test it, we are going to come into the post and actually remove, or better yet, comment out the part related to disabling days. So let's come in here, do this, and then in order to be able to select the dates, we'll just comment out this if, which will remove the comments after, but for now it is necessary in order to test it. So when we reload the page, all of the days are available to us. And if you remember correctly, we had a reservation between the 18th of June and the 20th of June. So let's try to pick out the date between the two of them and reserve. We get an error that it is already reserved, and if we load up the page, there isn't any more reservations because we have 8 and now we have 8 as well. Okay, so now let's come in here and remove the comments to bring everything back to the normal state. Now let's try to pick out another date between the 23rd and the 27th. Reserve, everything seems to be okay, and there we go, we have a new reservation. And we can try it again just so that you can see it. I can just remove the if on change, so everything is fine. Let's come in here, and because the if is commented out, we are able to pick this date, reserve, and already reserved. So if you load up, those days are still able to be picked out. Okay, so now there's no way of abusing the system. If a reservation is made, then you can pick any date that is in between it, or that contains that date. Okay, so this is it for today. We learned a lot today: how to use Populate, how to validate data, and that we should always validate the front end and the back end. So yeah, that's it for today. In the next lesson, I'm still not sure what we are going to do, but maybe we'll start working on the payment gateway. That's something that I believe would be useful to have in this series and not in the redesign, because it is really useful, and a lot of you guys, I'm sure, will take a lot out of it. So yeah, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Ciao!